Hello, I'm Sally Ann Ashley. I'm a UK-based abstract artist, and I also run a course for artists and creatives called Creative Shift. Creative Shift is a 10-week program based on my own creative practice of navigating the shifts in my work. Each time I become stuck in the studio or frustrated, I now have a framework that I can apply each time my work evolves. I've now shared my framework with many artists and witnessed numerous shifts on both the personal and practical level. I hear artists talking about how free they feel in their work, how much more confident they feel, how courageous they are in the studio. So if you're wondering if creative shifts for you this year, I've interviewed some previous course members and asked them to share a little bit about their experience on the course and how it impacted their practice, in the hope that it'll answer some questions that you have. I hope you enjoy the videos. And if you have any questions, please contact me on the links below. Thank you. Today I'm chatting with Joyce Berger. Joyce joined me on Creative Shift earlier this year, and I've invited her here today to share a little bit about her experience on the course and how it impacted her practice. So welcome, Joyce. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Sally Ann. Good to see you. Always so good to see you.
Oh, you too. Joyce, if you could just start by telling me, what does your creative practice look like and how long have you been creating for?
Well, I guess I've been a creative person, but I didn't start painting or doing any kind of artwork until COVID started. And then I started dabbling in different little courses and then ultimately took Louise Fletcher's course in 2021. And that kind of launched me into becoming more serious and focused. But up until then, I really was very sporadic and didn't really have a practice. In our class, when you asked about practice and process, I was just so confused. I'm like, what is she talking about? So it became apparent that I had landed in the right place because I
Okay.
had either. Yeah.
Yeah. It can be when that question comes up, it can be quite scary when you're not sort of used to probably using that language or be in a course where the questions are thrown at you instead of me delivering on, well, now we're going to do this, and now
Yes.
we get
Yeah.
given that in other courses.
Yeah.
Okay, so what drew you to Creative Shift?
Well, I was stuck. When I took Louise's class, I learned all the hows. I learned a lot about mixing colors, technique, composition, all this, but I didn't really know. I knew what the elements were, but I didn't know how to translate them into my own creative practice. So I was stuck, and what I would do is I'd reach out and I'd take another course. What I discovered was I needed somebody telling me how and what to do. That was my old way of thinking. And so I felt very stuck and I knew I needed help. And I guess what really drew me was I liked the word shift because I needed to shift something. I wasn't sure what that was. And I had also been on your free group for a long time. And I felt like I don't know, I liked your spirit, your generosity, the way you responded to people, your kind nature. And I thought, well, if there's anybody that's going to help me, it's going to be Sally Ann Ashley.
Oh,
So that's how I came to your course. Yeah.
oh, brilliant. And what was your experience of Creative Shift?
Well, it was much deeper than I had anticipated. I had reached out to somebody and they said it was difficult at first for them. It was very introspective, I guess. And so I knew there was going to be some looking inward, but I had no idea how deep this course would go. And you also mentioned at the beginning that you can stay on the surface, but the juicy stuff is under the surface. So the deeper you're willing to go, the more you're going to benefit. And so it kind of like called me to action, like, okay, I'm going to go as deep as possible. So it was it was something that ended up shifting my entire life. I remember somebody saying that when you make one change in your art practice, it transfers over to your life. Or if you change something in your life, it goes to your art practice. I really didn't understand what they were talking about, but after taking this class, I just see something shifts over in my life, and the next thing it shows up over here. I find it incredibly sort of magical.
Mm.
Yeah, it's magical because it's
Wow.
almost like it happens unconsciously.
Yes.
I guess
Yeah.
that's what makes it magical. Yeah.
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 So I'm dying
Mhm.
to know what shifted for you.
Oh, well, everything. So the biggest thing, the shift words, when you challenged us to come up with some shift words, my word, oddly enough, was quiet. My leading word was quiet. And that's because, and I remember I made a journal entry that said, I must have quiet. I felt very strongly about it. And I didn't even really understand why, but even today, in a completely different quiet space, I still know the importance of quiet. So that set the stage for everything else that was able to come about. It was like pulling a thread. Quiet, I discovered in order to have quiet, I needed to have boundaries. Otherwise, people would interrupt my quiet. So some people would interrupt it, and then I would interrupt it. So I had to have boundaries with myself too. My
Wow.
husband's funny. Now he comes towards my studio door and he says, is this art time? Or can I talk to you?
Oh,
So he knows
I love
about,
that.
I know he's very, very supportive and respectful. So that shifted, it became apparent I needed to slow my life down even further. So I started taking things out of my calendar that I had just put in without giving them thought. So I developed the habit of discernment. If somebody asked me about doing something, I would really think about it, and I would think about, how much time is this going to take? How much energy is it going to take? Is it something that's worthwhile for everybody? So it really helped me stop doing a lot of things that I just automatically would do. I went to a lot of art things and I trimmed back on some of the art things. I just scaled down my life, and I'm still working on it. It's a
Wow.
work in progress. Yeah. Um, so well, let me just see. I made some notes. Well, obviously the foundation was my shift word, and those three words kind of carried me throughout the course. So I had almost like a North Star to look at.
Mm.
So when I was trying to plan where I was going, I would be looking at quiet, boundaries, and play. Play was my last word, and it really only came into play about a week ago,
Yeah.
but I held out because I wasn't accustomed to playing.
Yeah.
The other thing I discovered that was really important was I'm allowed to play. This is something I'm doing as, I don't know, a means of discovery and exploration more than mastering something.
Yes.
It's not like I want to master the process of painting. I want to understand what's going on inside me and how that ties into my practice. That was something that was completely lacking before. So part of that is just explore, just play, take the pressure off. This isn't a job. I was a workaholic in my past life, and I want to make things a job. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, you're retired, you're older now, you're entitled to just go have some fun. So the shift words were really important, for that aspect. And really important is the discovery and exploration, the
Mm.
concept that I learned. When I picked the word quiet, quiet was really more just a thought or an idea, like a concept. It wasn't really an experience. And now quiet is an experience. And that's a
Mm.
big, huge shift. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. Yeah.
Isn't it isn't it funny? And I think creative shift helps with this. It's like when we think of new things or new ideas or we're given new information, we can sometimes feel resistant to it because it's new or it's other and we're not quite sure. And then after a little bit of exploration with that, it kind of sits in with you a little bit. And then we
Yeah.
get to that stage. And then if we allow it, it kind of washes over us a bit more and sinks that little bit deeper. And then the integration kind of comes. But it I think it takes giving yourself this period of time and like committing to yourself really to, if you really want to change, like you said, I need a shift. That's what attracted
Yes.
you. And
Yeah.
it's one thing as deciding for ourselves, I want that, but
Mhm.
actually applying yourself, putting the work in, allowing, going through all
Yes.
these stages is the like next part for these things to settle with us. So it's so interesting that things are still moving for you now, and it's no surprise for me, and they will continue. But we
Yes.
did the course back earlier in the spring, wasn't it, months ago,
Oh,
and yet these words are still guiding your
yeah,
life when
definitely. Yeah. That was another thing I noticed in the class was that transition time was needed. I would jump from one project to the next project to the next project, and I would never take the time to really absorb
yeah
what was coming in. I just kept packing stuff in, packing stuff in, packing stuff in. I remember I went on a bird watching. That's one of the things I decided not to do. We have a lot of birds where we live, and there's an Audubon Society bird watching walk every, I don't know, so often. And I was thinking of joining up. And so I went on one of the walks, and I mean, the people there had been bird watching for quite some time, and they were talking about so many aspects and birds and markings and this and that. And I stood there and I thought, I'm really very interested in this, but I don't think I have the brain space
yeah
for it. So
yeah
I consciously, discernment came in, and it's like, I'd love it, but there are other things that are higher up on the list of what I need or what I feel like I want in my life.
Mm.
So that transition, it's like a lesson and then a pause to absorb it.
yeah
And then it, as you said, it's not magic.
Mm.
It's not like, oh, I have the lesson, I've got it, I'm off. But it is magical because it just
yeah
filters in. That's
yeah
very interesting. It's really good.
I think what I loved about what you just said is it reminded me of the saying, FOMO, fear of missing out, when we
Yes.
like with the bird watching. So you had this idea, you wanted to go, and it's like when we see anything, new art materials, new courses, new books, new this, and we just like try and, get them in and get them in, we want
Yeah.
them. And then
Yeah.
usually it's a case of we like physically probably can't take on the capacity of them, we can't do that, but then
Yes.
we kind of have this yearning that we still want that thing, and then we feel like we're missing out, and then we feel down on ourselves, and then whereas hopefully with the learnings of creative shift, like you said, that discernment part was really important, because you can now look at something, decide if you've got the capacity and make
Yes.
a
Yeah.
conscious decision like,
Yeah.
I'll just leave that for now. I know it's available, but I've
Yes.
got so much here that I need to
Right.
process this and make some space before
Yeah.
I invite something else in.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's a much more, I find it a much more like confident way of working, because you've made the decision, you've
Yes.
decided that
Yes.
you can't take more on.
Hmm.
And then the thing is, you can now have the skills that it's like, well, if I still want that thing, if it's still like a nudge or it's still
Yes.
drawing
A
me,
nudge. A nudge. Yeah.
then I need to do something with what's going on here, and maybe I can
Yeah.
put something else down. So,
Yes.
so what we're
Yes.
doing is like reducing the feeling of overwhelm by
Mhm.
just kind of being on top of our things, and like organizing what we already have, what
Right.
we're
Right.
doing.
Yes. And overwhelm was part of something that was going on in my practice because I would come in, I would be all excited after I took a course. I love to learn things. Then I would come into my studio to do something, and it's like, I have no idea what to do. And then I would feel, oh, I'm not any good at this. I don't even know why I'm doing this. And then blah, blah, and it would just get worse and worse. And then finally, I would just say, well, I don't think I'll do this today. Sometimes I would tidy up. But now, because I'm allowed to play, I have the choice. I could just make some marks. I could just put some paint down. I could, I have choices. And those small choices do support my bigger picture. They do.
Yeah,
I
they
mean, I
do.
was I was making something the other day. I wasn't even planning on making. I was tidying up and I said, "Oh, this might go with this and I like this with this." And the next thing I knew, I had these random pieces of paper that just all kind of came together and it's like, "Wow, I love that."
Brilliant, brilliant. Do,
Yeah.
You feel so good when that happens, don't
I
you? And
know.
it's like really reassuring that all
Yes,
your time in the studio, whether you're inside, whether you're outside looking at something, all that like mindfulness that you're,
right,
that's sitting in your mind, it comes out.
right,
And then
right.
you trust in yourself then that you're hanging on to the things that you need to hang on to or want to hang
Yes,
on to.
yes.
Oh,
Yeah, and that was, I think you mentioned it or it came up in the conversation, the nudges business. I ended up getting, because then I would be in the studio and it's like, oh, I don't have any ideas. Well, what I discovered in the course is I do have ideas. I just don't pay attention to them. And so I started a little book for my nudges. And every time I get an idea, I write it down in the book. And then later, something might come of it or may not. But it's like when I'm feeling as if, oh, I don't really know what to do, I have this little reference for ideas.
perfect.
All these little things that came about, elements, pieces of the puzzle, just, I don't know, it's just, it's so good.
Yeah. I
I
think
wish everybody in the world would take your course. I do.
I think we need to say more about the book. Maybe I should that should be part of
Yeah.
saying in the course, keep a nudges book.
Oh, I think it's wonderful because it's small enough that it's handy. It's right there with my playbook. So
Yeah.
it's just a natural thing. And I'll get an idea. Like I was online on our Zoom call and I got an idea about something. And I thought, oh, I like that idea. I'm writing that down in my nudge book.
Yeah.
So,
So what
yeah.
do you do then when you go back? Do you look at the list and is it how do you decide what you're doing next?
Well, it's really more for if I'm stumped. If it's a big nudge, then it shifts over into a kind of a seed,
Okay, yeah.
that's going to start to grow. If it's a big nudge, and then I start to gather supplies for it, or I start to organize, like I want to do this face thing. So I have a clear plastic folder so I can see everything in it. And
Mm,
anything that pertains to that project goes in there. So
yeah.
it's like I'm building the foundation for it. I haven't taken the big step into the unknown yet, but I
Mm,
know I have this. And so that's like a seed that continually nudges me because it's visual and concrete.
yeah.
That folder says to me, don't forget, we're going to do
Mm,
faces
yeah.
someday, you know?
That's really interesting because I think from from what I'm hearing there and the way I'd interpret that is you're kind of energy checking with yourself as well because the more
Yes.
that folder builds, it's kind of like that nudge is building, and the energy
Yes.
is rising in you because it would be a different story if you went back to the folder and then all of
Right.
a sudden you felt like, oh, well, I'm not into that anymore. But
Yeah.
equally, that would be okay because at
Yes.
least you've not gone and painted
A
10
lot.
canvases with something you're not really, into.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
this is a
Yeah.
good way, I guess, of like you said, starting to build the foundations of a project. And you're
Right.
just slowly adding to it when you feel the need until it wants to come to fruition.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting because I never approached doing anything in that type of organized way. And I find that almost incredible because even though I don't like to be organized or I don't like the process necessarily of organizing, I need that clear, empty space in order to
Mm,
feel some clarity. So I organize a lot.
yeah.
And kind of my whole background was about creating order. So I never applied that to art. And I thought, why didn't I apply what I knew from that life into this life?
Yeah.
It never occurred to me.
Yeah.
So it's beginning now. See, that's part of the
Yeah.
connections,
Yes.
going
Yeah.
back, taking something from a past type of behavior and bringing it in.
Yes.
So it's fascinating
It
to
is
me.
fascinating, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think, I said that through the course that I don't do because I love to work really freely and really
Mhm.
create, really expressive and spontaneously.
Yeah.
But I don't like to feel like I'm out lost in the wilderness of then I'm like, oh, what am I doing here? So it's kind of like building all these foundations so that
Yeah.
you can have that freedom on top of that.
Right.
Or you're planning and you've got some source reference there of your faces, and maybe you've thought about some colors and
Uh-huh.
so then when you do get to a canvas or a bigger piece, it's like you're ready to go.
Right. Right, right. I don't
Oh,
have to figure it out on the fly. You know, I
yeah,
like kind of like to know, I don't know. I'm a planner, I guess.
yeah.
I'll just admit it.
Well, it's nice to, I think, to have both, to have the support you need in terms
Right,
of you've already done a lot of the groundwork without really even realizing, but then you can
right.
be really free in your painting practice and
Yes.
full of exploration, you know, because
Yes.
you've got these anchor points, I guess, to come back
Right,
to that you've already
right,
set. So,
right. Yeah.
um,
And almost parameters too, because it starts to take its shape. You
yeah,
know, it's like the application or how am I going to do this is starting to take shape, even though I haven't started,
yeah,
yet,
yeah.
in a concrete way, but it's like a little squirrel getting their nuts ready for the winter.
Yes,
So
yeah, storing
I'm,
up.
I'm
Um,
storing up.
I think what I love about that though, and I know I definitely work in this way, and this is what I promote in Creative Shift, that if you've got this rough, loose kind of framework for what you're
Mhm.
working on, even if you start and you go off somewhere else, and then, I mean, it might take on a life of its own once you go on somewhere else. But if it didn't, and you get down the path and you think, oh, I'm stuck, what am I doing here? At least you only have to come back like one or two steps to go back to your folder and be like, right, where was I again? You know,
Right,
you're
right,
not you're not going back to zero and then being in despair, thinking, oh,
right.
what am I doing?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other part of that, you just said that even if it loses energy, it doesn't matter because there was something going on there anyway,
Yes.
worth exploring.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always have to be, in my mind, I am not so result oriented at
Mhm.
this point. I was at the beginning. I did an exhibition. Somebody invited me to do an exhibition. I did it, an exhibit. And at the time, I said, I don't think I want to do that again.
Yeah.
It wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't like the pressure. So I
Yeah.
like the freedom of, I don't need a result. My result is what I did today,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
happy with it. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've touched on quite a few of the tools there as
Yeah.
we were chatting. Is there a tool or something in particular in Creative Shift that really helped you move your work forward or helped with this shift?
Um,
Any of the weeks in particular that you think that was the best week for me?
Well, I'm very big. I was just trying to decide what if I had to pick one or two. I think the nudges are brilliant. I mean, the
Mhm.
nudges and the seeds. Just the concept of nudges, paying attention to that. The other thing that probably might even trump that is the notice what you're noticing. That is like, I mean, I have noticed and learned so much about me and my style of just in my house, in my closet. I mean, I see the same patterns in clothing, in sheets, and this, and floor mats, napkins, Kleenex boxes,
Yeah,
everything is so similar and it's all unconscious. I
yeah,
never paid attention. And if anybody asked me a question about I would just be, I have no idea, but I obviously do because there
yeah,
it is all over the place.
yeah,
So I started noticing what I was noticing, and it's incredible to me. The other thing, the tool that I really like is your question why. You always ask why. You ask a question, the question is answered, and then you ask why. And it's like, wait a minute, I answered the question.
yeah,
Now you want to know why? It's like, okay, why? But that is a really big tool. I think
yeah,
that's an essential add-on to the question
yeah,
because it just, as you said, you can stay on the surface or you can go deeper. And the why makes it drill down just a little further and more feelings, information, things I see, whatever. It's like, oh, now I understand that. So then there's an element of understanding that I didn't have when I just answered the question, what color do you like? When you
yeah,
say why, it's like, oh, well, let's think about that.
yeah.
You know, so I
I
think
think,
I think that's all very, so it's hard to pick one week, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. And the way they kind of link on as well.
Mm, they
Yeah.
do. Yeah, they do.
What did I want to say there? I feel like the whys are a little bit like what we mentioned earlier. When you first are hit with new information or a new question, and you just think it's a quick answer, like, what's your favorite color? Green. And then
Yeah.
you get why, and you just think, well, it's just
Oh,
green, you know, because it's like new, you know, so
yeah.
then you have to think why. So that's like you
Yeah.
say, it slowly just goes down. Okay, well, I like this and it makes me feel like this and da 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 da
Yes.
da. And
Yes.
before we know it, we're able to articulate a painting because we can talk about it in a way that we didn't at first, maybe.
Exactly, exactly. And that happens too when I'm trying to understand why I don't like a painting I'm working on. When I say why, it's like, and that live painting, that session we had that time, and you were painting over something, and I thought, oh, wow, you're really going for it. So I did too, and painted out everything I didn't like. I mean, that was, and ended up with this painting that I loved, which surprised me, you
Brilliant.
know, because I just had to get rid of what I didn't like. But the why question is, well, what don't I like about it?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't like the darkness. I don't like this, you know,
Yeah.
it's a way of discovery. It's more discovery about everything.
Yeah.
And I love
And
that.
learning to read your work is just so valuable, you
Yeah.
know, really having those conversations with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay. So when we're in the course, roughly, I know this is going to be quite difficult to answer, but roughly how many hours do you think you spent on the course in a week?
Well, I did clear the time for the course. I had signed up for the previous one and had to pass on it because I felt I needed time. So I pretty much emptied out everything else that was going on. And I don't know, I mean, I would typically I would print out the questions or whatever we were doing. I would review them. I may not answer them. I'd like put them aside and then I'd come back to it. So I don't know. I suppose I could have skimped and done it in a few hours, but I think I probably would have spent every week, oh, easily 8 hours
Mm.
every week because I was into it.
Yeah.
I could have done it in 3 or 4,
Yeah.
but I found it so interesting. It was like I wanted to. The other thing, not to change the subject, but that mind mapping thing. Oh my God, I do that all the time now on
Yeah.
everything. I mean, my faces, I did a mind mapping. So it's just, I mean, so yeah, I could do 1 or 2 mind maps and I'd be done in a couple of hours, but it's like, oh my God, let's try it on this. So I
Yes.
don't know, you know, minimum, I would say a few hours, maximum infinity
Yeah. Yeah.
all day.
And
Yeah.
were they kind of, was it like broken up? Was it a few minutes here or, you know, an hour there?
I would usually spend an hour at each time I was going to sit down and do something. The few minutes might be glancing at what was coming up just to plant it in my head.
Yeah.
But then I would spend an hour several times a week, um, you know, just hunkering down and getting to work. Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you just said about the mind maps. And what I love about Creative Shift is that all of these tools, once you're aware of them,
Yes.
you can use them in your life, you can use them in your art, you can use, you know, wherever. And you can't not see in this way now.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So
Exactly. Yeah, it's a problem solver for me. If I want to know something, I just make a mind map of it and free associate.
yeah,
And I learn so much.
that's
Just, I don't
brilliant.
know. It's a really fabulous tool. Yeah,
Oh,
it's a fun
great.
tool. Useful. Yeah. All of your tools are very useful. I have to tell you that. They
Oh,
stand
good.
alone, they are useful. Together combined, they're incredible. Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
because
brilliant.
it's woven together. In my mind, I just see a mastery of how you took these elements and made them just sort of flow easily. So people, I wasn't overwhelmed by it. And if I was uncertain, I would just like post a question. I don't understand what process is. Any ideas? I looked it up in the dictionary. What does that mean, process? And
Yeah,
it's like, as it pertains to art, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So I don't know. It's just it's a great course.
Okay, which brings us on nicely to,
Yes.
if anybody's watching, listening to us on this video and they're considering taking Creative Shift next year with me, what advice would you give to them?
Take it. I would just say take it. I've already encouraged a couple people and other people that I would talk to about the course. They're like, what course is that? I mean, I've been asked about the course. I think if you have time in your life and you want to make some significant changes in your art practice and in your life in general, and if you feel like you don't have the time, you might just really think you don't deserve to take the time. I suggest you just put aside the time, give yourself the gift of it, and just do it. I really think it's a game changer for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting that you said that, that maybe we don't feel we have the time, or we're not allowing ourselves the time. That's a
Right.
really interesting point.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's really come to me of late, recently. Just I had this issue come up, and all of a sudden I became highly aware of time and how valuable it is, and where am I spending it?
Yes.
And am I spending it in a way that's enhancing my life and making me enjoy my life, helping me enjoy my life? Or am I just going through the motions over and over again
Yeah.
with just maintaining a life? I think there's a maintenance that comes with life that takes a big chunk of time.
Yeah.
But then there's also, well, what about enjoying life?
Yeah.
Don't we deserve that?
Well,
You
it
know?
comes back to, like we said before, about being really discerning, doesn't it? About what you're allowing in your life and what can cut
Yeah.
out some noise maybe that's not benefiting you, or, yeah, how and where do you want to spend your time? So,
Right. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, and that discernment, I think, came from my quiet word. I don't
mm,
know that I would have picked up on that if I didn't have that shift word, you
yeah.
know. Otherwise, my life would have been quiet by now.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on it. It's still like crazy, but it's getting better. Yeah. At
Oh,
least I
Joyce.
know now. I know now,
Yes, you're still choosing for it to
Yeah.
be a certain way.
Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes in this notice what you're noticing, I'm noticing that things I see and noticing things I wish were there, like more empty space. It's like I'm
Mm,
noticing what's missing, you know.
interesting.
Yeah, I noticed that quality time with my husband was missing, and
Mm,
and that was from here. And I know that. I
wow.
knew that it was like, well, why aren't we having so much fun? But I didn't hit on that.
Yes.
And and so that shifted.
Yeah.
So quiet
Yeah.
in my heart. Yeah.
Because the biggest thing there is awareness. And once we have to become quiet to be mindful about
Yes.
these things. But
Yes.
once we are aware of them, that's when we can make changes.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like when we were saying, the beginning of the course can sometimes be a bit sticky and a bit like, oh,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
because we're becoming aware of maybe the things that we're not so keen on, you know.
Right. Right.
But the reason that we're feeling that we want to shift in the first place is
Yeah.
probably because of those reasons. So until we have a look in there and go, where am I? The whole thing of start from where you are.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
that's how we can start to make a change. But
Exactly.
you've got
Exactly.
to notice these things first in order to do it.
Right, right. And and that's right. It's like we have to have a look in and see what's going on
Yeah.
in order to make those changes. So I don't
Oh.
know. It's great.
Joyce, I have loved witnessing your journey this year and
Thank you.
continue to. And thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
chatting with me today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye bye.
Bye.